So I know a lot of people, when they think of me, they think of live sound because I did spend a lot of years doing live sound. But what some people don't know is I actually got my start in my career a long time ago working in the studio and working with DAW. So today I want to talk about some tips for working faster in a DAW. So I've been using DAWs really since the 90s. I mean, it was Pro Tools, and then I remember I had a brief stint using something called DEC and Cubase, and there was a little piece of software called Vegas Pro. It wasn't owned by Sony at the time. I'm not even sure if Sony still has it. I'm not even sure if it's still around. And then, of course, Pro Tools. I've used Pro Tools primarily for a long time, and to show you these tricks today, I'm gonna use Pro Tools, but on the forums, the way they make it out is like every DAW is way ahead of Pro Tools. So I'm guessing these tips will work for really just about any DAW. I hope so. I'll show them in Pro Tools, but I'm sure you can figure out a way to use them in your DAW of choice, because there are a lot of options and you do not need to use Pro Tools. I use it because I've been using it for a very long time and I'm very familiar with it, but use whatever works for you. So tip number 1, use a default plugin preset. What do I mean by that? When you open up a plugin that you use on a regular basis, you should have a preset of settings that automatically loads. And I'll just show you an example. I'll pull up FabFilter Pro Q3, one of my favorite EQs at the moment. Whenever I open it up, this little preset up here, my Start Auto, shows up. I've got a high pass filter set at 80 hertz. It's in natural phase mode because there's different settings, and I like the natural phase one because it works more like an analog style EQ that I'm used to working on. And then the other thing I really like in this is it's got this, if it'll quit hiding, this automatic, this auto gain, which is is cheating. Basically, it will compensate for gain loss due to EQ. It really is cheating. But why not cheat if you can? So the way I set this up is, you save your settings as a preset, and then right here in Pro Tools, there's this nice little button, set as user default. I'm assuming that most DAWs have this, hopefully, but then you set it every time you open it up, it just pulls up your start. I see guys in videos, they open the thing up and then they set 4 different things in the plugin like they always do. Why? Just create a preset, have it work for you. Very fast. Tip number 2, use the plugin search. If you're like me, you've got a lot. I mean, look at this. There's a ton of plugins. I mean, I do a lot of stuff with waves. I mean, I think that's everything. Just about. I don't use all of that stuff all the time. None of us use that much stuff all the time. I mean, you just look, there's not a whole lot of craziness going on in this session. 9 out of 10 times, I know what I want before I go looking at it. I'm not pulling up a list and going, gee whiz, what compressor am I going to use? Because there's 100, 200, who knows how many options are in here. So just use the search. I want the arouser. There we go. Quick, easy. Or, oh, you know what? I want the pawn shop because that one's pretty cool too. Boom. Just use the search. Way faster than scrolling through menus. Menus suck. Let's just be real. Menus suck. Tip number 3, learn your hotkeys. You'd think it goes without saying, but a lot of people, they just don't know their hotkeys. When I first started out with Pro Tools, we had stickers that went on the keyboard. In fact, I've still got a set somewhere. Where are they? I'll dig them up. Here they are. These are very old school. Let's see, what's the date on these? Doesn't even have a copyright date on them. These are old. But these go with what Pro Tools calls the command key focus, which right up here in this corner, you can turn on the command key focus. Actually, now they call it the keyboard focus. Once upon a time, these were the command keys. And these are basically just hotkeys for Pro Tools. I'm sure just about every DAW has these. I know Reaper has them, and you can program the Reaper ones to match what you know in Pro Tools. But these are keys you should learn a lot. Like, for example, I zoom in and out all the time. People ask me, why don't I use the Smart Tool in Pro Tools? Well, it's because I've been using Pro Tools so long, I know all the keys. So I can get to the selector or the grabber or back to the selector or go between shuffle and slip mode and spot mode and all those kinds of things. I also have things assigned to my mouse so that I can toggle between the different tools too. But there's hotkeys for that. A long time ago, that's all we had. So learn your hotkeys. I know there are overlays and stickers and all kinds of things you can find for your particular DAW. I recommend getting some of those and learning how to do things fast. All right, tip number 4, use track are we on 4? Use track presets for signal flows you use all the time. For example, I have a lot of track presets. So for example, here is my, let's see, we'll pull up the guitar. There we go. It's got my EQ I use all the time, this Waves EV2. Link for that in the description if you're interested in checking it out. I've got affiliate links for Waves plugins. Then I've got some other stuff on here. Sometimes I use the Pro Q3. Sometimes I use the CLA 3A as a compressor. Sometimes I use Renaissance Axe. All that stuff is there. It's all ready to go. Another benefit to track presets, I've got all of my different sends on here. So all of my different effects and things that I might use. And as I've been getting into Atmos, that only seems to be increasing for me. So having that all there ready to go saves a whole lot of time. I don't have to think about what I want to load up there. It's all there. I don't have to remember it. It just does it. So use some track presets. All right, tip number 5, use a template. Templates don't have to be super complicated or fancy and have all kinds of things preset and pre-dialed. They can be as simple as just having a couple of common reverbs you use in there. Maybe your buses are already set up for a session. Maybe you like to use mix bus compression or some other stuff on your master bus or mix bus. Just have that set up in a template and ready to go. It's just a time saver. So you can work fast. You can come in and just start working. You know, this session here, this was done from a template, but my template, I mean, I did videos on my different templates, and it's changed since I did that because I don't think I was mixing in Atmos when I did that. But, you know, I've got a bunch of reverbs, you know, different effects. There's some Atmos stuff, VCAs, just all the kinds of stuff that I always end up creating anyways. I just have that in a template. It's all ready to go. It's not really doing any processing right out of the gate. It's just so that I have all my tools in front of me, and it's not like I'm going to go digging through a drawer trying to find something. Use a template. All right, tip number 6, color code things. Now, I've got my own set of colors I use. You know, drums are green for me because drums make it go, so it's green. Maybe you want green on your vocals because the vocals are what pay the bills. I don't know. You come up with your own thing. Bass is brown, obviously. Guitars, keyboards. I have my own colors for everything. And what that enables me to do is I can just, at a glance, look in my session and see a track and know exactly what it is before I even try and start deciphering what kind of hieroglyphics and abbreviations are in the naming. And, you know, that's another tip. By the way, use names that make sense to you and that you can look at really fast. Like I can look at and go, oh, there's my quarter note delay. There's my eighth note delay. There's a slap. Long verb, short verb, things like that. Just make it simple. LV, I know that's the lead vocal. All right, this is a Pro Tools specific feature, but again, I'm assuming there's a way to do this in most DAWs. Pro Tools typically defaults to having this like rainbow color thing, like all of the tracks alternate, which drives me nuts. How can you tell what anything is? If you hop up here into your preferences, over here under display on the right, default track color coding. I always set it to track type. You can change all of the colors later on, but I always set it to track type because then it colors everything to just some kind of basic color right out the gate that makes a little more sense to me rather than the kind of, random rainbow of fruit flavors of tracks that are on there. The other thing I do is this default clip color coding. I always set it to track color. That way, whatever color I color a track, that's the color that all the clips on there are going to be. I know some engineers, they have some different ways of working. They don't like to have any colors on their clips, and then they can color things based on editing. That's perfectly fine as well. Whatever works for you, just use color coding so that you can move through quickly. Tip number 7, maybe this is controversial, but label your sends. I don't understand why people have all these sends that say like bus 1 and 2, bus 3 and 4. I mean, if you can remember what those numbers are, hey, more power to you. I have so many sends. I mean, let's look. Buses, I'm up to 300. I mean, it's with Atmos, it gets crazy, the number of sends. But it's insane. How can you look for things? How can you keep track? It's crazy. But if everything's labeled, it's a whole lot easier to find stuff. I know, oh, this sends to my lead vocal verb. This sends to my background vocal verb. This sends to my delay, slap, my split harmonizer kind of thing. All that stuff, it's labeled, it's easy. Where's it going? It's going to my mix bed. That's a whole other Atmos thing, but it could be a mix bus. Stems, wherever it's going, just label it. Very easy. And you don't have to go into, at least in Pro Tools, you don't have to go up into I/O and do it. Like if let's just put this on a random bus. So here's one, stereo bus. Rename it. Parallel, saturation, sidechain, thingamajig. There you go. It's labeled. I don't know what that is, but it's some kind of parallel thing. That's too long. You can't read that, obviously. But I could call this, it's the widget 1, whatever that is. Whatever it's going to be, just label it. Give it a name. Name your sends. It's 2022. You don't have to do numbers anymore. We're not on analog. I mean, maybe you still are an analog console and you have to remember the numbers. But on an analog console, we weren't just remembering the numbers. We were also remembering where those sends are just physically on the channel strip. It could be anywhere nowadays in DAW. So give them a name and name them. All right, last tip. Have some primary plugins that are your primary go-tos. This maybe needs a little longer explanation, but what is your basic EQ that you call up when you need an EQ? For me, that's pretty easy. I'm just going to go right to Pro Q3. What's your compressor for basics? For me, I'm going to use the Arouser, or maybe I'll use the FabFilter Pro C2. Whatever your favorite compressor is, have really just one, maybe two that are your main ones, and just call that up. Now, I know some people say don't have these big, long lists of plugins there. The reason I've got all of these in here is if I get sent a session that's using something like that, I would rather have it already installed and ready to go than to have to go digging around looking for an installer. So it's a little easier in that regard. The other reason is sometimes I do want to go and use something else, and sometimes whatever my go-to was, it wasn't quite there, so now maybe I am going to go through a list and I'm going to start trying different things. But for the most part, I know in the back of my head, hey, Valhalla Vintage Reverb. That's probably going to be the first reverb I go to because it sounds good, doesn't use a lot of DSP. I love the H Waves reverb. I have some presets in there. That one uses a little more DSP, so I'm not using it as much at the moment. Maybe when I move up to a faster machine, that will be my go-to again. But in the meantime, I go to Valhalla, but it's one or the other. For a delay, I know I'm going to go to H delay, things like that. I could talk a little more about some of this maybe in another video. What are my go-tos? My go-tos, though, are mine. They don't have to be yours. You should figure out what are your go-tos. Pick your favorite plugins. Don't worry about what everybody else is using. Just pick the ones that you use that work for you, that gives you mixes that you like or that your clients like, and have those as your go-tos and just go straight to those. Don't, if you have to look through a list of EQs and go, gee whiz, I don't know which one I should use, you're in trouble right there. So find one, and it could be the stock EQ for all that matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just use what works for you, figure it out, and you can work faster. Anyway, those are just my tips for working faster in a DAW. You know, I could do one if you want to see one that's more Pro Tools specific, you know, leave a comment and I'll look at that. If you want to hear about my favorite go-to kind of plugins, I can do that. I don't know how much that stuff really matters. I think you just need to figure out a lot of that kind of stuff for yourself. Don't chain yourself to what other engineers are doing. But I hope this helps. If you got comments, questions, ideas, please leave a comment below. If you want to find out more about me and some of the work I've been doing and how maybe I can help you either improve at your own engineering skills or maybe just help you with your music, you can visit my website, www.staglproductions.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.